I'm going to leave you now, Harry, in the capable hands of Oliver, okay?
Yes.
Doing a bit. All
Okay.
right. Yes, hello, Harry. Well, where do I start? I am 27 and I was born in London to a British mother and a Brazilian father. So I'm sort of technically half British, half Brazilian. And that's sort of how I obviously know Jane and that side of the family through my Brazilian connection. And I grew up in London most of my life. And then I went off to Newcastle University in the UK. And I studied economics there. And while I was there, I had the opportunity, I was really lucky to go on a study abroad, an exchange, if you like, where you go off to one country and someone else from that country comes over to the UK and sort of takes your place. And that opportunity was in Australia. It was actually in Newcastle, Australia. So I studied in both in Newcastle, UK, and in Newcastle, Australia, which is pretty funny. And that was 1 year, and I loved it so much there in Australia that I thought, oh, I've got to come back. So I finished my economics degree in Newcastle, and then I got a job in London as a consultant, like a technology consultant, which I can talk a bit more about later. And then decided to move to Australia. And so I moved to Sydney, and I stayed there for about two 2 years, and it takes me up until today, where I decided to do some long-term traveling. So I'm sort of a little bit all over the world right now, trying to see lots of places, and I'm actually going to India
Oh,
in January. Maybe I have some questions for you guys. You guys can help me understand a little bit about the
yeah,
country.
yeah, definitely. You can ask right.
Hello, sir.
Hi there.
I am Husnia, an eighth grader. I'm glad to meet you today. Sir, can I ask you a question?
Please do. Yeah, nice to meet you, Hasanaya.
Could you please tell us about your experience at the Newcastle University and what kind of job opportunities are there for economists in this world?
Oh, amazing. Great question. Thank you, Hasnaya. So Newcastle University is in the north of England. So it's a little bit colder there compared to where I'm from, London. It's a cold city, so it can sometimes snow, and it's a bit of a student city. So what that means is that unlike London, which is such a big city that there's all different types of people, Newcastle has got a lot of students in it. So a lot of the shops and infrastructure is based around accommodating students. But the people there are very, very nice. They speak with a very difficult accent to understand. So even though I'm fluent in English, even I struggle to understand the locals sometimes. The locals have a nickname called Geordies. So if someone is a Geordie, they're from the city of Newcastle. And they're very, very friendly people. Their sort of rule is, as long as you're, nice to everyone and treat people with respect, they're going to love you and, welcome you into their sort of home and that sort of thing. So Geordies, they like to have a drink and they like to have a laugh with people. So it's a very welcoming city for students, because so many students are there from all across the world. They really like that. So yeah, cold, very friendly, and a good university as well. You get a really good education there. Um, and as for economists, so economics is all about the study, or in my opinion, it's about the study of how we manage resources and how we manage our wants, right? So we have a limited amount of resources, whether that be, you know, things in the ground, trees or water or anything, any kind of resource. Um, but we have an unlimited amount of wants, right? There's so many things that the world wants to do and make, taking people from A to B in a plane, building things and that kind of thing. So economics is about how do we distribute the limited amount of resources in society in the best possible way, to ensure that maybe everyone has access to things like healthcare and education, but also make sure people have a little bit of their own sort of money to look after themselves and that sort of thing. So that's what the study of economics is, and I think the opportunity for economists is you can go sort of maybe in two routes. One, if you study economics, you can choose to focus in that field in economics where you're maybe helping the government. If you did maybe economics in India, you might work in sort of creating policies in India for helping people to afford education or afford healthcare, or thinking about how resources might be best managed in the country. Or you might go into a company. So you might work for something that's not the government, and there you might use your skills to analyze data and make decisions. So it's quite broad. You can do quite a lot of different things with economics. I ended up going into consulting. So that means I help advise businesses who have very specific problems about how to fix them. So they might have a problem of, we need to buy a new software to help manage our projects. So making sure they're delivered on time and on budget. And we need to pick the right software. So maybe, Oliver, you can help present a few different options for us, tell us how much they're going to cost and what they're going to do and what the pros and cons are, and then help us make a decision. So economists have that sort of skill set of being quite analytical, but also having a bit of, should we say, maybe empathy, like understanding people's thoughts and feelings. So I hope that answered your question, Hosnea.
Yes,
So
yes, yes,
you can
yes.
let me know if it did or didn't, and I can
Yes,
answer
yes.
a bit more.
You did a great job, in fact. So I have one curious question. Actually, you did your education at Newcastle University, and you
Mm,
also shared an interesting fact that the people in that region is different from rest of England and rest of
mm,
the people in
mm.
terms of the language. So could you please give us one or two examples or maybe
Uh,
instances where you are actually confused in communicating with them?
for sure, for sure. So a good example is even just the average greeting, right? So in sort of traditional English, you might learn when you greet someone, you say, "Hey, how are you?" or "Hey, how's it going?" Or in Australia, you might say, "Hey, how are you?" But in Newcastle, someone who's from Newcastle, they might say, "Why I man? Oi, why I man?" Which is why I man, like, "Oh, how are you?" So it's a weird one to get your head around because it's so different. It doesn't sound like the normal words that we used to. So they might say, "Oh, why I man?" So I remember hearing that for the first few times and thinking, "What are they saying? I'm not understanding." Um, Trying to think of any other examples. Yes. So the Geordies refer to Newcastle as the Toon. The Toon. It's sort of a play on the word the town. So they're saying the town, but they're saying it in a funny way. So the Toon. So a real Geordie will say like, "Oh, we're going to the Toon later." So we're going into town later. Which means they're going into the city centre. So yeah, when I first got there, I was 18 and I'd never met many Geordies, and I was a bit like, "Oh gosh, I'm not sure if I understand all these people," but yeah, you get used to it.
Yeah, how long has it taken for you to get
Oh, I'm
adjusted?
still learning. But yeah, but maybe after the first year, I thought, okay, right, I think I understand people now.
Yes. Thank you so much for giving us very interesting information about that. And here is
No
one more
worries.
student is going to interact with you. Radhika, over to you.
Yes, sir. Hello, sir.
Hi, Radhika. Mhm.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's a nice warm day here in Brazil. How are you? Mhm.
I'm fine, sir. My name is Radhika. I'm studying in 8th grade from GPH Sailavaram. I'm so excited to interact with you. Can I ask you a question, sir?
Of course, yeah.
How many languages do you speak? Is Portuguese easy language to master?
Great question. Great question. So I can probably say that I speak one and a half. So I definitely speak English and I am learning Portuguese. I'm probably at a basic level. So I can have a conversation with someone, buy a bus ticket, order a meal, that sort of thing. But in a very loud room with lots of people talking, I'm going to struggle. So I speak English fluently and sort of basic / intermediate Portuguese. As for is it easy to master? I think one of the things that's very helpful is that English and Portuguese share the same alphabet for the most part. So the letters I'm going to understand. So, one of the difficult things that someone from England might struggle with if they're learning Japanese, for example, or Chinese, is that the alphabet is completely different. So even the basic structures are different. So it can be quite easy, I guess, to pick up some basic phrases in Portuguese for someone who's learned English, because sometimes the words sound very similar and you can sort of have a guess as to what they mean. So, for example, the word hotel is hotel. So you can kind of, okay, right, understand a little bit. Is it easy to master? Well, I haven't mastered it just yet, so I'll let you know. But I've been learning it for 4 months and feel reasonably confident. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question, Radhika. It was a great question.
Yes. So, in fact, you are lucky because you have started learning the Portuguese, and that too in Brazil, and where the Portuguese is, I think, is spoken widely. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah. Portuguese is the main language of
Yeah.
Brazil.
So, with JN and with family members, you can speak in Portuguese, and with outside also, you have to speak in Portuguese in order to communicate, I think.
Yes. Yeah. I'm very lucky. I've got some family I can practice with, and also my family have some friends who I've tried to practice with.
So I'm sure that in this environment, I think you are going to master this particular language very quickly. Then we get taught by some tutors, outside the Portuguese environment. All right.
Yeah, I think so. I feel like in order to really learn a language, the easiest way to do it is to immerse yourself, is to, um, everything you read, whether it be a book or you watch a movie, you listen to music, you talk to people, it means that all parts of your life are in Portuguese.
So could you please introduce 1 or 2 words to my students because they are so curious to learn the new languages?
Of course, of course. Well, if you want to say, let's stick with a greeting. So if you want to say, hello, how are you? You say, oi, tudo bem. Oi meaning hello, and tudo bem meaning are you well? Are you doing good? And the response to that is, sim, eu estou bem. I am good. I am well. So that's a sort of basic
Yes.
greeting, if you like.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. And here is one more student is coming up. Padmaja, over to you.
Yes, sir. Hello, sir. My name is Padmaja. I am an 8th grader. I am so glad to interact with you. Now, I would like to ask you a question. Can I ask, sir?
Of course. Nice to meet you, Padmaja.
Nice to meet you too, sir. What do you know about India? How India is different from the rest of the world in terms of cultures and traditions?
Great question. Great question. Well, I really would like to go to India, and I'm really lucky to say that I'm going to India in January of next year. I think my knowledge of India comes from the large Indian population that lives in London. So we're quite lucky that where I grew up in a nearby suburb, there's a large Indian community. So when I think of India, I think of the flavors, all the curries that I've had in London. We used to have metu vadai and I think it's roti and dals and all this sort of like really, really delicious food. So I think, first of all, I think of the food of India and how exotic it is, filled with different spices. And I'm trying to think of the name of the dish that I really liked. I think it was like a pancake. It was sort of, maybe Harry can remind me of the name of it.
Naan. Is it naan?
Naan, yes. Yeah, naan. Oh, delicious. So number one is going to be the food. And then the second is the amount of color in what people wear. So there being saris or pashminas. you know, the clothing there is very different to what we might wear in the UK, which makes it really, really interesting, I think. So second would be, you know, what people are wearing. I think is quite different and really interesting. And the third, I guess, we hear about, because there are so many people in India, you know, all the weddings are ginormous. You've got lots and lots of people going to there. And I think about the number of really intelligent Indians that I've met outside of India, because I think many, you know, travel outside of India to go find opportunities to work or to meet other people. So I think about how many people are in India and how amazing it is, how they've got in every corner of the globe. It's pretty cool. Mhm.
Yes.
Hello, sir.
Hi there, Nandikishore. Nice to meet you.
This is Nandikishore and 9th grade student from JPH Saravaram. Now, I'd like to ask a question. Here, my question is, would you mind tell us about life in Sydney? How it's different from the UK?
Great question. Thanks for asking that. So I lived in Sydney for 2 years, and I also lived in Newcastle, Australia for 1 year. So I've spent about 3 years of my life in Australia, and I think I can answer your question about the differences between Australia and the UK, and also how life is in Sydney. So life in Sydney is very, very nice. I have to be honest. It's a beautiful city, both in terms of the architecture, so the buildings, but also the natural landscape that it's in. There's so many nice beaches nearby where people can surf, and lots of little hikes nearby where you can go for nice nature walks. And the people there are very, very nice in Australia. I think Australians have this attitude of anyone can be an Australian. If you put your heart into meeting Australian people and trying your best to learn the Australian culture, you know, you can be an Australian within a year or so. People really really like it when you take interest in their culture. Sydney specifically is a very outdoorsy city in the sense that people love to go for runs and be exercise and be healthy. It can be very expensive there. It's one of the most expensive cities in the world, but it is a beautiful. We have great, great weather because it's pretty warm. In summer, it can reach, 40 degrees, and even in winter, it doesn't get too cold, sort of 15, 20 degrees. And yeah, it's a beautiful place. Very, very nice people. Lots of beaches to go to, and that sort of thing. The difference between Australia and the UK, there are some. It is the two countries are very, very similar. Obviously, Australia was it used to be a colony of the UK. So, originally Australia was set up by a number of British people who had moved over. But before that, there were actually a group of indigenous population already living in Australia. So Australia has technically been around for much, much longer than the history books would say, and we're already a population settled there. But modern Australia has been around for 200 years. But the differences, I think, are that British people can sometimes be I don't know, maybe less hospitable sometimes. So I think Australians are really come into my house, come even with my family, and British people can be a bit more takes more time for them to open up, I guess. I think the Australians take life less seriously than the British. So the British can be very intense about where you're going in life, who you're going to meet, whereas the Australians can be a bit more, it'll happen when it happens. I'm a bit more relaxed about life, so they have a bit more of a relaxed and laid back attitude to life than the British do. And what else is a difference? The food is pretty similar, but Australia has more of an Asian influence from China and Japan because of how close it is. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Yeah, so the differences, food and.
Yes, sir. Hello, sir.
Hi there, Mamatha. How are you?
I'm fine, sir. What about you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Hello sir, my name is Mamata, an 8th grader from JPH School, Ailavaram. I'm so excited to interact with you, sir. Can I ask one question?
Of course. What's your question?
Here my question is, what kind of part-time jobs did you do when you were at a school or college?
Great question. Great question. I had one job. Oh no, I had two jobs actually during my studies. So the first job was in Australia while I was a student, and I went on a website. I can't remember what it's called. It's sort of a jobs posting board where people can post, "Hey, I'm looking for some help in this small job and that small job," and they normally pay in cash. And the job was to help a lady remove lots of weeds and dead plants from her garden. So I was sort of digging up lots of different plants and helping her to clean her garden, shall we say? And it was quite funny because she had three big dogs in the garden who would jump on me when I'm trying to, in a nice way. They were looking for pets and cuddles, but I was trying to do my job, do the weeds, and they made it quite difficult, even though they were very cute. So I did that for a little bit. And then when I came back to Newcastle, UK in my final year, I worked part-time as an ambassador to the business school. So that meant I helped new students join the business school. I might give tours to some prospective students, so people who were thinking about studying at Newcastle. So I would help them sort of answer any questions they may have or worries they may have about the course, or what life was like in university. And I paid a little bit of money to give a few tours. I wrote a few blogs as well. So I would write up online a bit about my experience and give advice to some students. So yeah, two jobs: one as a gardener and one as a business ambassador to my my university.